Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. It is a big week around here, not just because I'm going to Houston to visit the former home of my Allers and watch the Ravens run around with the Texans, but we are launching a new web platform at Baltimore Positive, and you will see it at WNST.net as well. I am inside the 10-yard line, and we don't have any plans of kicking a field goal. We're going to score. So by the end of the week, we'll have the new Baltimore Positive hatched. This guy has been a big part of all things we've done at WNST over the part of decades, and going back to our relationship with John Stedman, and he is a Pro Football Hall of Fame voter. He shows up in Canton. He shows up in Houston. He sometimes shows up on the shores of the Chesapeake Bay watching baseball games. We welcome in the man, the myth, the legend, going on 40-some-odd years now at the Houston Chronicle. And, John, I'm coming down to Houston. I'm going to go up onto the roof and watch a football game in Houston with no one. Am I doing the right thing this weekend?
Personally, Nestor, we had 3 people and a photographer at Kansas City for the Thursday night game because it was an unprecedented first game with 15,000 fans in the stands, very little tailgating. We didn't know what to expect from players protesting, so it was unprecedented. So from now on, we're sending one to each game, but I don't know why, really, because you can't do any interviews except on Zoom. You see it on TV, and most of the time, the press boxes, unlike M&T Bank Stadium, are way up at the top, and you have to watch it really on the TV anyway. So there's no advantages as there always is to being at a game. I don't see it, especially since you can't interview anybody except on Zoom calls.
So you will not be at the game on Sunday?
Oh, I'll be at the game. I'm talking about I'll be at all home games. We're going to rotate. Going on the road, instead of sending 3, we're just sending 1 to road games.
Well, yeah, same thing with me and Luke. I mean, we had 1 seat in the box last week, and, who am I to argue with it? I said, all right, you go home and I'll go away, and that's what we're going to do for a little while. Luke's had the mask on. It's different for him. He's covered 20 baseball games like this, right? So for me, I don't go to Orioles games. I'm banned and whatever, and he went to this game. This is going to be a little bit of a shock to my system, John, and I couldn't help but hear it in the voice of Al Michaels on Sunday night out there in L.A., and I know you know all about fighting for franchises and getting stadiums built and what it means that first day when you open the stadium. This Vegas in L.A., this is not what you and I were doing out at the Biltmore a couple years ago when they were stripping San Diego and St. Louis of their football teams, right?
No, they were expecting new stadiums full of fans when they made their debuts. But you know what, Nestor? It is what it is. We're all dealing with the same thing. I saw a story today by some guy that's the head of the biggest medical research firm in the country, and him saying that he didn't think a cure for the coronavirus would be available to everybody until 2024. There's a lot of people that think we could still be doing this next season. So we better get used to it because it's a sign of the coronavirus times.
John McClain is here, the venerable NFL insider for all things Texans. All right, so we feel good. We're 38-6. I mean, big win, Lamar, all the promise. I think I had you on the show a couple months ago, and we talked about organizations like the Ravens sort of hunkering down, having good leadership, the protocols that are going to need to be made here. But more than that, the football communication, actually getting out and playing. Luke spent his night the other night watching that BYU-Navy game, that looked like a woodshedder. The Ravens game was a woodshedder. But by and large, I thought the level of play in the league was pretty good through week 1. And, Texans aside and how they played against the Chiefs and the Ravens, these really good teams, they might even be that much better because teams like the Browns were a little ill-prepared to play and probably to be expected, right?
Well, it is for a bad team like the Browns that's lost 16 consecutive openers and has been pathetic in first games since they came back and were reborn in 1999. It's no surprise the Texans lost to the Chiefs. They've lost 4 in a row and 5 of 6, and yet they've come back and won the division every time. So I'm writing for tomorrow why it is the Texans are so bad in openers. They've won 8 consecutive games after losses. That should bode well for them against the Ravens. The problem is they've not played a team as good as the Ravens after a defeat. And it's so funny here. Everybody wants to fire Bill O'Brien as they do after every time they lose. really they want to fire a Nestor after they win. And when they win, they want to give everybody else credit. And I pointed out, I said, I said, the Ravens were 14-2 last year and didn't get any farther in the playoffs than the Texans did. And they're like, well, they still want O'Brien fired. And it's been amazing to me what kind of role the Ravens have been on since they were 4-5 in 2018. I believe they've won. The reason I've looked this up is I'm writing about 19-3 in regular season since then. But people here are no longer satisfied with AFC South titles. They want a team that goes beyond the divisional round for the first time. And we haven't had in Houston a team in AFC Championship game since 1979 when the Oilers went to Three Rivers. And the last time they hosted an AFC Championship game here was 1961 when the Oilers beat the Chargers for the second AFC title. So people here last year, one of the reasons they're so angry that they choked that 24-0 lead in Kansas City in the divisional round. Had they won, they would have hosted an AFC Championship game for the first time since '61 against the former Oilers. So that's made the pressure on Bill O'Brien even worse. Now, of course, DeAndre Hopkins has a career high 14 catches, 151 yards to help the Cardinals upset the 49ers, and everybody's killing O'Brien on that one too.
Well, what happened with Hopkins, and just in general, as leadership goes, you've witnessed a lot of different leaders throughout all of this, as well as on the baseball side. You're a huge Astros historian as well, and I've been reaching to you about all their things before they were cheating, and I'll probably reach again at some point. But the leadership there in O'Brien, I mean, compare and contrast what's been there and what else is available. I was watching the game on Sunday. It said John Harbaugh in his 13th year with the Ravens, and I'm like, I don't think about it like that, but boy, that does sound impressive, doesn't it?
It does, especially when can't remember if it's Jim Mora or Marty Schottenheimer who said the shelf life for a coach is usually 10 years. And then they quit listening to you. You see Harbaugh's success, Sean Payton's success, they have just shot that down because obviously the players are still listening to them. Bill O'Brien is in his 7th season. He's had winning seasons in 5 of the first 6. The one they didn't win, have a winning record. They had 23 players on IR and 13 starters, including Deshaun Watson in his rookie year. But people here want him fired all the time. And I asked a guy, I do a mailbag that's posted on our sports website, and I asked one guy, okay, you want him fired now after the Chiefs game, who do you want to be the head coach, Romeo Crennel? O'Brien had so much more success than Romeo did in his too. You want 32-year-old offensive coordinator Tim Kelly. You don't Anthony Weaver, who's in his first year as a coordinator. Who do you want? Well, they don't have any answers. The fact is they're going to ride with Bill O'Brien again. I don't think he'll be fired because I think as long as Deshaun Watson's the quarterback, they're not going to be a mediocre or bad team. They'll be good enough to win the AFC South, win a wild card game, and lose a divisional game on the road, which is what they always do.
Well, you mentioned a dear friend of mine, Anthony Weaver, one of my Facebook friends and one of the real decent people to ever put on a Ravens jersey coming out of Notre Dame and is now on this pathway to be a real leader in the sport. Some thoughts about Weaver and this defense and tackling Lamar Jackson, which is not an easy task for anyone, no matter what your personnel is at this point. Lamar has made a lot of defenses look foolish in the regular season through 3 years now.
In 2018, Nestor, the Texans were 3rd in the NFL in run defense, giving up 81 yards a game. Through 9 games last year, they were 6-3, giving up 84. And then they went to Baltimore. They gave up 256 yards rushing to the Ravens, and they've been horrible against the run ever since. In the last 10 games, beginning with the Ravens, they're giving up 166 yards a game. So they've gone from 84 to 166, but in the middle of that season, and nobody here can figure it out. They tell us, well, we got to not miss so many tackles. We got to do a better job in the gaps. Well, and now Anthony, he's taken over as coordinator. He's still defensive line coach. It's his 5th year here. Everybody loves Weaver. Everybody here believes, based on what we've seen so far, and I'm not talking about the performance against the Chiefs because he doesn't have a lot of talent on defense. I think that Anthony will be a head coach. I said that about Mike Vrabel, and he got hired by the Titans after the 2017 season, and I believe that about Weaver. You're going to start seeing after this season, Anthony gets some love, and then I wouldn't surprise me at all if in 2022 he's not a head coach.
John McClain here from the Houston Chronicle. You can follow him, McClain, on NFL and all things Hall of Fame, as he has his Hall of Fame lid on. And we had Chris Pike on. We're honoring all the pro football writers in the Hall of Fame people this week. Lamar in the Hall of pretty good early on, and I don't know if we're seeing a generational player here or not, but the win totals and 38-6 in week one, and when they lose, it's by a hair usually, and in January it's been disappointing. And he's at that point where we're a year and a half really into his career, and it's Super Bowl or bust, right? He's got to win games in January. They got to win the Super Bowl. A lot of expectation, same expectation on Deshaun Watson. And meanwhile, Mahomes got his, right? And there seems to be some level of calm about him in opening night with, a handful of people in the stadium, and they're giving out rings, and they're letting banners fly and doing all that Mahomes picked up right where he left off. Lamar picked up right where he left off. Where are the Texans in all this, other than maybe a cut below with a really good quarterback at this point in a generation where there are two pretty good teams on the come?
Well, they're definitely a cut below the Chiefs and the Ravens, who are the premier teams in the AFC. I picked the Ravens. Excuse me. I picked the Ravens to go to the Super Bowl and lose to the Saints. And I don't think the Chiefs will repeat because nobody ever repeats. Hadn't happened since the Patriots after 1-2. But I think it'll be Baltimore and Kansas City in the AFC Championship game. And the Texans, they're not as good on defense as Baltimore is. I think Watson is a great young quarterback. And by the way, when Jackson sees him, of course, he should be thanking him for that new contract he signed, because that just ups the barometer even more for when Jackson signs his extension. And the thing is, they do a great job of coaching him, and they do a great job of taking advantage of his skills. The Texans have added speed at receiver. They got running backs who can catch, tight ends who can catch. And even though they have all five starters back in the offensive line from 2011, the right side did a terrible job of pass protection against the Chiefs. And Watson was on the run again like he used to be. Now think about, and this is something else I'm writing about tomorrow, Matthew Judon, 2 sacks last year. He had 3 tackles for loss, 4 hits on Watson of the 10 hits they had. They had 8 tackles for loss. And I said they must be licking their chops, including Calais Campbell and Derek Wolfe, the new starters, at the prospects of going against this offensive line based on what they see against Kansas City. So I would imagine that unless the Texans change their strategy and have that ball come out as soon as his back foot hits the ground, that he's going to be getting chased around a lot again. Watson likes to hold the ball, Nestor, because he wants to throw it down the field. He does a good job of that. But, man, because of that, he has to spend a lot of time on the run and trying to get away from guys trying to obliterate him.
Well, we'll certainly see how this matchup goes. Last year, pretty lopsided, and I would think there's some hurt feelings down there and some memories about all of this. And former Raven Anthony Weaver trying to draw them up. John, for the league and them playing football and the television experience and the made-for-television part of this now in Vegas and in L.A., there was a sense of normalcy for a little while. And I know you got out a little bit. You visit here in Maryland. You're going to make a home here. And we've talked about your fandom and having a crab cake at Camden Yards 5 years from now and your retirement after 2 parades for Deshaun Watson in Houston, no doubt. But this weekend for the league and the importance of the league and where it is and not just the gambling and the fantasy and whether it makes people feel good but it felt like something normal in a time when nothing has felt normal. And I guess for those of us on the inside of it that cover it, it's not normal for us because we're used to being around the players. We're used to being in a different sort of circumstance and the way we cover it. But there was a point for Sunday where my wife was running into the back and I'm on the bed with the cat and I'm tweeting and she's high-fiving me, that it felt like, well, we haven't done this in a long time. This feels like something normal that was taken away from us.
I think the NFL's done a fantastic job with as few positive tests that it's had. I got tested every day during training camp. It was an easy process, and I think the league did a great job. And most important, teams did a great job. Every team spent several $1,000,000 to adjust and change for the way that the NFL's medical experts recommended in the protocols that were handed down. And then players need to be given a lot of credit. If there's nincompoops like the Indians pitcher or Lou Williams with the Clippers, or the Seahawks player got cut, or Daniel House from the Rockets who got booted from the bubble because he had a woman in his room, which is a violation of protocol. But the majority of players have done a great job that we know of. There could be some out there just haven't been caught of doing what they're supposed to do to avoid coming back infected and spreading it around their team. I know if you get hit, like this happened this weekend, and the guy that hit you is not contagious, you don't have to worry about getting infected. All you got to worry about is getting up and not having a broken leg or blown Achilles or ACL like normal. But I think overall, I thought Kansas City had 16,000 fans spread all over Arrowhead Stadium. It was a very unusual sight. I've been going to Arrowhead since 1980, and I've never had such an easy time getting into the parking lot and then getting into the stadium.
I'm still trying to get parked from the game last season, I think, John.
And it worked out great. Things were different in the press box, social distancing, and it's things you just get used to, but it's all about product on the field. I thought the piped-in crowd noise, I was watching, I was switching around watching a lot of games yesterday, and if I didn't know, if I couldn't see the stands and I just listened with my eyes closed, I would think it was normal circumstances.
John, you're a Hall of Fame voter, so I'm gonna bring this to you because we signed and by the way, I was at the Biltmore with you when it happened a year and a half ago. I hit Eric DeCosta, and they had just signed Earl Thomas to this big deal, and he was going to come in, and it really is a credit to the Ravens organization that they would jettison him and the way they run the place, and they brought Calais Campbell in, and I know you know a lot about him as well, but Man of the Year and all of that. I don't know what it did to Earl Thomas's Hall of Fame candidacy, which felt like it smelled pretty good a year and a half ago and didn't really even smell all that bad until his wife was chasing him around with a gun back in Texas 6 months ago or whatever. But the fall from grace there is pretty precipitous, and the Ravens just don't put up with that, right? I mean, but that is an unusual story around this league to have a guy like Earl Thomas just thrown out in the middle of August.
Well, first of all, the Ravens have taken players with baggage in the draft, just like the Seahawks have, and they've won Super Bowls with those players. And the key to Earl Thomas to me was when your leadership council and your players want somebody gone. I'm guessing that if they hadn't done that, he'd still be there. And I thought it took some big footballs by DeCosta and Harbaugh to do that, to cut a guy like that. But I would have, they certainly didn't miss him against the Browns and may not miss him all season. You mentioned the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame bylaws. Nothing that happens off the field can be taken into consideration when we vote on candidates. It has to be between the white lines. Now, if a guy is disruptive on the field or on the sideline, then that's different. But if what they do away from the game, like Earl having his wife put a gun to his head, that's got nothing to do with.
But I think that leads to him getting thrown off the field, right? So I guess what I'm saying now is the circumstances over the last 7 or 8 months have taken a guy that when it comes time that you're going to talk Hall of Fame, you're going to have to talk about a guy that's leadership council in a team that might go 14-2 again this year, throw him off the team, right? So that there aren't a whole lot of guys getting room for the Hall of Fame that you're going to have that kind of conversation. I just find that to be fascinating at this point in his career.
And we will have that conversation, but anything that happened away, like his wife and that problem, that won't be considered.
John, for you and the strangeness of all of this and the fact that they made it onto the field, shocked that they made it onto the field because I know back in May, June into July, we were all a little skeptical of all of this. And I know you love baseball. We had a little pennant race here until the Yankees showed up over the weekend here for the Orioles. The bubble has been kind to the NBA. I've watched Barry Trotz do well with his Islanders. So keeping an eye on all of this, but the NFL does feel like the real meal. The rest of it's felt like the appetizer, right? And these 7-inning baseball games and 10th inning and the guys on second base and all that. The NFL, at least still at this point, a week in, to my way of thinking, has the most integrity of all of this. It felt like a fair fight the first week, and it felt like a real thing to me, not like what baseball feels to me like, which is a little bit of an Eddie Feiner tournament. I think I talked to you about that 2 months ago.
It felt like the real deal unless you were the Browns. And I'm sure it didn't. Well, I guess it was a real deal for the Browns because that's the way
And
they
the
start
Jets.
every season. And I think sports has done an incredible job, and the NFL should have done the best job because it was last. And it could learn from the other sports. The problem for the NFL was so many more players, so many people who worked with the players. And I watched the setup. I think the Texans spent about $4 million on things they did over at the facility, beginning with BioReference mobile home where we got tested in the parking lot. And players took them about a week to adjust to the logistics of 3 dressing rooms and 4 cafeterias and facial recognition to get indoors and limited number of people in the weight room at the same time. But
How about the little wristband, the 6-foot wristbands? Remember those?
Yeah, everybody had to everybody had to adjust. And the Texans never had one positive test. And so that's a credit to them and everybody. And the fact that the ones that did have positive tests got them taken care of by the time the season started. So hopefully the worries that we had about regular season when they started hitting each other will not come to fruition, because if you hit somebody and you don't have the virus, you're not going to give it to them.
John, the Ravens are coming in. It'll be strange times. I wish we were going out to Memphis for some of those delicious nachos and salsa and doing all the things I like to do out on Westheimer and out at the Galleria. And my cousin lives in Katy, as you know. You've entertained my cousin and her wife as well for some Mexican food. I wish we could do all that, but sometime soon, I'll come down. We'll get an Astros game in or something before all this is over with. But I will see you on Sunday from 6 feet away. Anything I need to know about Houston coming in? By the way, my wife's coming in to say hello. She's not going to let you go before she waves
tell Jen
to you.
I said hello. She looks great as always. Hi, Jen. Beautiful as always. And we have 50% capacity at our restaurants here. Everybody's supposed to be 6 feet apart. Of course, everybody's got to wear masks. When we were up at our place on the Chesapeake Bay, I was amazed at how we would go to places on the water and how everybody did such a great job. I was worried being in another state, and I didn't get close to Baltimore, so I don't know how they do it there. But, man, they did a tremendous job. And here, we got 6 million people, and a lot of them are supposed to do stuff, and they're not. But it shouldn't be a problem if you come straight to the stadium. I'm eager to see how it's going to be in the press box at NRG Stadium compared to the way it was at Arrowhead Stadium.
John, take care of yourself. Stay safe, and we'll see you this weekend. Play some football here. I should say this. Mark Vandermeer said something to me that when he got off the elevator at Arrowhead last week, he just felt grateful to be there. You know what I mean? Like to make it there. And, I made one practice a couple weeks ago. It was 100 degrees. Luke's out there wearing a mask. I'm wearing a mask, and I'm sweating, and I'm seeing nothing. Lamar's not even practicing about 3 weeks ago. And, other than that, it's been a couch thing for me, and I'm building this new website and doing that. This is going to be a little shock to my system, I think, on Sunday, but I will feel grateful when I get off that elevator. Even though I told Vandermeer, it's almost like the foot of the moon. You almost sit at the edge of the moon when you're there in Houston. So you said to me off the air, why are you bothering coming? You're not going to be a curmudgeon here or no?
No, I'm not. I'm just thinking about safety when you're doing everything. You have to get every interview on Zoom. It's certainly different. Travel safe and have a good time while you're here, but mainly be careful, especially in the airports and on the plane.
I will be Purelled up. John McClain of the Houston Chronicle. You can follow him, McClain, on NFL. The venerable, almost 5-decade reporter of all things and recorder of all things Oilers back in the 70s. I am Nestor. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. On my way to Houston. Luke will be in Owings Mills and on Zooms as we prepare for the Houston Texans and the merger of WNST.net and Baltimore Positive. Back for more right after this.